Hey everyone, I'm your host from Fallout, and welcome to Crossing Darkness, a podcast about the role-playing game, the world of darkness, including games like Vampire the Masquerade, Mage the Ascension, Werewolf the Apocalypse, Hunter the Reckoning, so on and so forth. We're broadcasting on over Twitch on Sundays, 7 p.m. to 7:45 p.m. Central Time, and we are open to chatting with the fans during the show. This is season 2, episode 11. And my co-host with me today is Motorori, who helped me create a podcast and a 40-person, 4-table Gen Con event that involved all the different games that we're kind of talking about here today. How's it going, Mike?
Pretty good. We're just coming off of Thanksgiving weekend, which during the current times for people listening in the future was actually pretty nice because I didn't have to go anywhere because of the pandemic.
Yeah.
But I still made a bunch of food for myself, and I'm still eating it. And it was actually kind of nice. You were able to come over last night. It was just the two of us, so pretty safe. And we watched some Lords of the Trident quarantine karaoke.
Yeah, that was fun. That was a good time.
How has your week been? I keep forgetting to ask you after I tell you.
Things been going good. Yeah, wife left on Friday to go to Wyoming for work for setting some stuff up, and then I've just been relaxing this week. It's been kind of nice.
Yeah, you're still working from home, so.
Yeah, that makes things a lot easier. So today's episode is going to be focusing on Madison's Supernode. So I think the first thing that we should kind of go into is what is a supernode? So it's kind of a term that I've coined. I don't know if other people have used it per se. I haven't really seen it's not an official thing for sure, but there are some mentions of things that I kind of stole it from or like kind of use supernode from, and that's from the Horizon, the Stronghold of Hope book. And they go into the 9 Horizon nodes that kind of support Concordia. So you have there's 9 star-shaped bastions project from a diamond wall of Concordia, which encircles the Horizon Chantry. Basically, they create gates in order to kind of get there. But one of the big things that they kind of talk about with each one of these gates are controlled by a extremely powerful node. So it says that each of the nodes described can be considered essentially endless source of quintessence. Each radiates an aura of sacred power that even sleepers can feel, and it cannot be drained by anything less than a full technocratic assault. In the penumbra, these places seem vivid, even by the spirit world standards. Through their glows, though their glows have been dampened by their supply lines that have been cloaked, any visitors with awareness, intuition, or prime magic. Oh shoot! My cat keeps on hitting stuff. There we go. Hopefully that
Good kitty.
Break anything.
Looks like the stream is still good.
Okay, we're good. So where was I? Yes. The supply lines are cloaked. So can sense the unusual. So if you have awareness, intuition, or the prime magic sphere, you can sense the unusual nature of these locations. All prime magic difficulties are at -3 difficulty within a half mile of each node. Even sleepers can feel the alive and even sleepers feel more alive and energetic in these if they visit these places. So like some of the different places that they kind of give here is the like the Arches National Park. Um,
Oh, so they give examples in that book?
yeah, the Library of Alexandria in Carthage. The Lesnock or the Loch Ness monster in Ireland. Um, Thomas Edison's lab in New Jersey. The digital web is considered a node, though the virtual adepts funnel quiescence from the numerous sites on the digital web into the horizon. The Banti node in Turkey, I guess, is once had similar amounts of quintessence until the
So do they actually have 9 in there?
yes, they have all 9 of them in here. There's 9 that power the the main Horizon Chantry Concordia.
And I'm guessing they're tied to the different spheres.
Yeah, each one is kind of tied to the different spheres. And for this, I don't think we need to get into the deeper of exactly what stuff that they've done with Concordia, because we're going to kind of focus just on Madison. So Madison's kind of different on this because their supernode doesn't connect to Horizon or to Concordia, and there's a major reason for that. So
Wait, real quick, what is Concordia? I'm not sure I've ever heard of that.
Concordia is the seat of power for all tradition mages. It's their stronghold on Horizon. So they have mages have Horizon realms that they use in the Umbra, basically. They're powerful places that you kind of set yourself up, like the main chantry of the Order of Hermes, Doisatep, is located in the Horizon realm. Um,
Yeah.
so the Concordia is the is where the council members meet for the head of, and it's
Okay,
the
so that's
most
where
powerful place. It's the capital of the
that's where
Arches.
the so-called Council of 9 would meet.
Right. Yep.
Yeah. Okay. And so we kind of took that concept of a supernode and placed it into our Madison Under Siege mythos and gave Madison its own supernode. But then we put a bunch of history on top of it.
Yeah,
Right?
you want to go over the so yeah, I think we'll go quickly kind of just over the history of this supernode and like the concepts kind of what we kind of built with it. Do you want to start us off with the 1814 BC event?
Yeah. Do you want me to read that whole thing?
Yeah, just go ahead and read just the 1814 part. And
You know I like reading things.
yeah.
Uh, Chibiabos is the beloved brother of the culture hero Nanabajo in the traditional stories of many Anishinaabe communities. By some versions, Chibiabos and Nanabajo are twins. According to others, Chibiabos is Nanabajo's younger brother. And in still other tellings, Chibiabos was adopted by Nanabajo as his brother. In some communities, Chibiabos, like his brother, is associated with rabbits. His name literally means ghost rabbit. But in others, he was a wolf spirit, often represented in the physical form of a wolf. Chibiabos was murdered by water spirits, usually identified as water panthers or horned serpents, touching off a violent chain of events that included the destruction of the earth by flood. Afterwards, Nanabajo accepted that he could not bring his brother back to life, so Chibiabos became ruler of the underworld. He is portrayed as a good and kind being who takes good care of the land of the dead.
Yep. So that is a little bit of a thing that I kind of found in Native American history about kind of gods of death thing. So I kind of took that and used that to say that Chibiabos, you know, was in our game was somebody that did die and became basically one of the powerful wraiths of the underworld in North America. And one of the things that he does is he finds this really powerful node inside of Madison when he's in the underworld. Um, Now, one of
Well,
the
what is
things,
now Madison?
what is now Madison,
This
and it,
is well before any colonization.
right, this is 814 BC, so not even in the AD yet. So the way that I kind of took this was that, I'm now there isn't a lot, and I think we should just do a sidebar here real quick. Is that there isn't a lot of information about how wraiths would use a node, um, and the way that I kind of took this was that either a Chibi, that he had figured out some way of using his wraith powers to use the node, or he just worked with dream speakers. Like one of the things I had was that the wraith, the dream speakers, the changelings, and the werewolves of North America and of the Madison, what is now the Madison area, kind of work together in order to use this powerful node. Um, so they worked together for about 1,000 years. First, they just kind of tapped the node to use it for its power, um, and they kind of were fighting with this Neverborn, which if you go into Orpheus and stuff like that, kind of talks about these Neverborn that exist in the Dark Umbra, that is super powerful um, specters who were never alive at one point. They've always just been specters.
Yeah, actually, I just read about that. They are uh, they're beings of oblivion who come out of the labyrinth, and in fact created the labyrinth to some extent that exists at the nexus of oblivion.
Right. Yep. And so they were kind of using this node and all, kind of created this what we call the Gahara Pact, to fight this Neverborn and to like kind of hold it down and lock it down with the Supernode. And so that lasted for that kind of pack between the Wraith, the Dream Speakers, the Changelings, and the Werewolves of North America lasted for about 1,000 years.
Yeah. Just a few clarifications. So at this point, they wouldn't be considered dream speakers. They're just, it's the closest tradition that we have in the books would be considered dream speakers, but it would basically be the shamanistic magic of the native peoples that existed here beforehand. And in fact, I was just thinking about the idea of like, okay, this guy, important person, becomes a wraith, maybe has more powers because of who he was. Because Arcanoi, the powers of wraith, still existed. That's kind of a timeless thing. It wasn't something that was developed.
Right. There's certain.
So maybe he's a little bit more.
Certain Arcanoi were developed later. They like I believe.
Oh, okay.
I'm not 100% on that, but there's the guy that was making artifacts or whatever. He was the one that kind of made one of them. But yeah, a lot of them are basically timeless.
Yeah, and so this guy who's relatively important in his area finds this node of energy that, even though it's probably not supposed to, like we discussed yesterday, is seeping into the Shadowlands, the dark reflection of this area that we now call Madison. And he uses that energy to basically empower the people who die in the area. In fact, he creates a necropolis before necropoli are even really a thing, according to the Wraith source book, which is, Charon doesn't really like do stuff until around Roman times, basically, which
we're getting
kind of goes back to, yeah, pretty much.
I mean, this is basically, this might even be Charon, like you could, if I could see stories as saying that this is Charon as well. I'm not sure exactly when he died, but
yeah. But anyway, so like in my conception, just a little bit of world building idea, like all these people who had their different tribes and regions in life now are all drawn to this central place. And with the Arcanoi allow you to affect the land of the living, there's a possibility that they're doing a lot of stuff with those arcanoi to affect the lives of people, because now this guy's like, wow, there's all this energy, and it can empower their powers. And so it could be somewhat of an explanation for why there's more of a actually, I'm not going to touch that because that's culturally sensitive, and I don't know about it enough to say whether or not natives in that era had different views on the dead.
Oh, I'm sure they did. I mean, it's all small tribes and stuff like that each one had their own belief structure. It wasn't like a North American belief structure at all.
Yeah.
But in any case,
well, I mean, there were actually quite large political organizations, what we would call political organizations.
Right. But in any case,
yeah. So I just wanted to throw that in there.
Yeah. So around 234 AD is when we kind of had scheduled it out that the Supernode and the Gahara Pact kind of dissolves. I didn't go into exactly like what all kind of happens around that time, but the idea is that basically, for whatever reason, the Gahara Pact mainly dissolves, and the Wraith take most of the power of the node to create an island realm within the Tempest. And so that kind of created, like, there's a Stygia, basically, of North America that is created during that time period. And so we kind of have, our own little special Wraith story that we kind of created during that time period. And for more than 1,000 years, until 1000 or 1634 AD, nothing really happens. Like, the Wraith kind of build their stuff, do their stuff, and hide the node, and make it so that nobody can see the node, and kind of take all that power from the node and just put it into this island realm that they created, this far shore that was able to be created at that time.
Yeah, and they're using the power of the node to obscure it from those who would use that power in the Umbra or in the material world.
Right. Yep. So basically, they're trying to stop it so that no other mages or werewolves or anybody is going to get involved in this, and just the Wraith are coveting that power at that point. So we jump ahead, more than 1,000 years. We go to 1634 AD, and this is when I have our character JD of the Order of Hermes arrives in Wisconsin, searching for powerful nodes. So he'd kind of created this new spell that was going to let him look into ley lines and stuff like that, to kind of see the hidden ley lines that the Wraith basically didn't anticipate this kind of special way of looking for nodes that JD invented. And he comes to Madison and discovers the Supernode, but at the time he just kind of spends a lot of time with the natives, the werewolves, the native mages of the area, and for about the next 100 years he works to build an understanding with the natives, and builds a strong kind of friendship with the locals, but doesn't immediately take over the node or anything like that. He kind of knows it's there, but he doesn't know exactly how to access it, or what's, he's got to do more study, he's got to bring more people in. And then
at this point he probably doesn't have an understanding of the underworld, the Shadowlands.
Right.
And actually, while you were saying that, I was just thinking about one of the ways that scientists figured out like where large celestial bodies are supposed to be is by watching all the other ones that they have. And that's what I've always thought about in terms of how JD was finding this node. Mm-hmm. Was he looked at all the other data points and he was like, there's something is supposed to be here. Like, he knew where it was supposed to be, but when he got there, it just wasn't there.
Right.
And so he was like, I need to keep studying this. I need to figure out why all this data is pointing towards this spot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yep. And so he spends like 100 years kind of trying to figure it out, but mostly also trying to like make friends and make it so that he can kind of stay in this area. Well, after at about 1720 A.D., we have a group of verbena that kind of come to Madison, and they found the Picnic Point node, which is not a super node; it's just a regular node, and basically declared war. like, so the verbena and the native mages kind of go to war with each other over that, and along with the werewolves and stuff, over that Picnic Point node that exists. Um, in the end, JD kind of tries to bring peace to these two different warring groups, but in the end fails, and so he takes off. He's like, okay, I can't be here while this war is going on. I'm gonna, he's gonna go off and do some other stuff and then come back. And so he does that after another 100 years kind of goes by. So 1829, which is the official um, time period where Wisconsin, um, well, I guess it's 1836 when officially Wisconsin becomes a territory, or Wisconsin Territory creates an act of the Supreme United States Congress on April 20th, 1836. By the fall of that year, the best primary groves of the country surround Milwaukee were occupied by New England farmers. Anyways, basically, Wisconsin becomes a state around that time. Um, and JD kind of comes back and is the one who works to kind of get Wisconsin to become a state, basically, and Madison to be the capital. So one of the things that JD does around 1836 is JD creates the capital on the Supernode, and he has arrived. He has approval of the Horizon Council and has sent an open invitation to traditions across the world to join the Madison Chantry and to build chantries around Madison, to kind of create
Yeah.
a stronghold here in the New World.
Uh, so let's go back a little bit. Uh, I have a feeling the reason he waited until now to do that is because he's a hermetic and he needs structures and symbols and stuff in order to take the power of the supernode. And until basically Western civilization moved into the area and started building buildings, he wasn't able to do that before.
Right. Yeah.
Right?
Until there was like more
Yeah.
Western civilization kind of moving into the New World, he wasn't. He was more of just kind of gathering information the first time that he was here for the first 100 years. And it was more
Yeah.
the second time coming back was with all of the more understanding of how to access that node, as well as the concepts of building this huge structure around it, which would require Western civilization to take over that land, basically. Um,
Yeah.
and
Uh,
there's another part though that's a big thing that he needed to kind of wait for. It's about 24 years afterwards, but Rebecca Troy is basically the key to unlocking this node, which is a Tremere vampire who used to be a Order Hermes mage before being turned into a Tremere vampire. She was around before the time. She was part of House Tremere, and she was part of House Tremere before they were all turned into vampires. And she eventually decided that it was a good idea to continue working with her, um, her house as a vampire. So she allowed herself to be embraced um, around that time. Well, before that time period. So she's been an ancient mage for a while before she became a vampire, but her understanding of death and her ability to kind of access the underworld without being totally messed up by it, which is kind of what happens to a lot of mages. They get the death resonance on them if they access it, where Tremere don't, they're already dead. They don't care. So It
Yeah.
wasn't until really Rebecca shows up and he makes an alliance with her that, and in fact, he's the one who kind of brought her over here and had this, had worked with her before she was a vampire.
Yeah, I would just like to interject here that all of the stuff that we are currently explaining is lore that we came up with in 2015 and 2016 over the course of months, where we were trying to figure out, like, okay, we've got this story to tell about this current Gahara Pact, and we have to go back in time and like figure out all these things that happened to make sure that it's like where it is.
Right.
It's like, why is there a Supernode in Madison, and why does nobody know about it? And it's all this. And yeah, so my recollection of this part was that JD had like he was playing the long game, because like he's basically immortal with his magics, kind of, and he's trying to get this huge power source because he's a hermetic, and he just wants it for whatever reason. And he finally gets to the point where he's like, I don't understand this part. But he used to work with, like you said, Rebecca Troy, who's now a vampire, has access to knowledge of the underworld, and that's the part that he was missing. And now, so that's 1860, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think the next major event is when they eventually cast the spell to try and take over the node.
Yes, so I'm trying to look for that. I thought I had, let's see here.
Is it not in this document?
Because it was the night of the fire. The fire at the capital that burned down. There's like a burning that, like a huge event that happened at the. I thought that I had it in here. Let's see. Does not look to be in the document that I copied over, or the stuff that I copied here. Let me go back and just see if I can find that real quick. But yeah, there's a fire that happens in. Actually, I can just look it up in real or on Google. So.
Yeah, I've got there's one in 1904.
That's it. The fire of Madison's capital on fire.
Weren't there two fires though?
Madison Capital fire. Let's see here, 1904, 1904. Everything I'm seeing is 1904. Yeah, and I'm 90% sure that that's the one that we used. Because there was a gas jet. Let's see here. There's something on the second floor. Yeah, basically Madison's capital burned down in 1904, and we kind of took that event and said, all the stuff that you can read, and if you want to read about it, look it up on Google. But there's huge fire that burns down a whole bunch of Madison's capital in 1904, and we blame that on Rebecca Troy and JD, that they cast a huge spell and kind of cracked open the breached the barriers between the two worlds and caused a huge basically by breaking this spell it caused this huge explosion of problems. Like we kind of have it that the Umbra and the if I remember correctly, it was basically the Umbra, the Dark Umbra, and reality all kind of merged together, and there's all these crazy events that are kind of going on during that time period. Werewolves are trying to deal with all of the Bane spirits that are running around causing chaos and stuff. And so this is when the time that basically the new Gahara Pact is created, where they're like, oh shit, first of all, they've learned that the Wraith were obscuring, this powerful node, and the Wraith were really pissed off about it, that they were trying to crack into their node. The werewolves kind of find out about this because there's, all these supernatural
there's a
crazy.
Huge...
I'm sorry, what was that?
Oh, sorry. I think my connection went slow for a minute. In the Umbra, there's now just this shining beacon of gnosis and spiritual energy that like has been obscured by the wraith for so long. And yeah, and so it's the wraith show up, the werewolves show up, the mages and vampires are already there.
Right. Yep. So basically,
And
at this point is when they're
everybody's
like,
pissed.
yeah, everybody's pissed off at each other. Everybody's kind of trying to figure out what the hell is going on here, and so they all kind of get together and they say, okay, like there is a supernode here, but it's way too powerful for us to like one of us to own. So how about all four of us work together? We'll reuse this wraith magic to kind of obscure it, and we'll reinforce it with all of our magics to reinforce that cloak that's on it. And then we'll also make it so that everybody kind of gets a little bit of that magic coming from this node. And so they all kind of agree, we'll keep it quiet. We're not going to give all of the power to, like, basically JD goes back and doesn't let any of the other mages know that there's a supernode. Rebecca goes back to the vampire community and, uses all this stuff to kind of help the vampire community, but doesn't let them know that there's a supernode that's helping them, which the vampires kind of use it for blood. We kind of worked on a way of kind of creating a special blood source for the vampires, which allows them to have more numbers than they normally would in Madison. The mages use it to create their Horizon realm. The Wraith use it to continue to maintain their Tempest far shore that they created. And the werewolves use it to power their Karn that they have in the Arboretum.
The other thing that I came up with for the werewolves was that the area, Madison and the surrounding area, you'll find a lot of uncorrupted worm spirits. So like the worm is less corrupted in the Madison area.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So, and that kind of gets us to, there's a bunch of other kind of stuff that kind of happens after that point. But I'll let Mike go on, because I think that the next really big thing to deal with the node at that point, besides we did some minor things with a couple games that we did with it, but the next really major event, and I think actually this event plays first, which is the 1999 Avatar Storm and the Great Maelstrom that wipes out the Wraith. So, until 1999, basically from 1906 to 1999, there's this pact that's created, the Gahara Pact, between the vampires, werewolves, mages, and Wraith. And in 1999, the Avatar Storm breaks. Now, the mages of Madison aren't completely wiped out by this, or JD actually sticks around and doesn't. From then on, he doesn't go to the Umbra because he'll get killed by the Avatar shards that would rip him apart if he tried it. So he gets stuck on Earth, which is fine with him. And he continues to lead Mage Society in Madison up until like 2016 or 15 when we have a major event that kind of happens. But the main thing that kind of happens here is that the Wraith get wiped out. So all of the power that was protecting all the power that the Wraith were using to obscure the node, that was no longer working. And the pack needed to kind of go out and figure out how to include a new group into this, and kind of how are we going to replace what the Wraith were doing. And so that kind of runs into what Mike worked a lot on, which was the Hunter group. So I'll let you go into a little bit of that.
Yeah. So in my conception, all of a sudden you have the shining beacon in kind of a desolate Shadowlands that had once been built up and well populated. And at the same time as the Avatar Storm wiping out the stuff in the Shadowlands and creating that beacon, you have this huge resurgence or huge surge of what we call hunters, which is from Hunter the Reckoning, which are humans imbued with shards of stuff.
It's kind of
I don't know.
almost
There's
like an
no good.
avatar that they because it's shards from the avatar storm, but yeah, they never explain exactly what it is.
Yeah,
There's a couple books on it.
they're very vague. Um, I think the best way that I've heard it described is hunters are the immune system of like humanity or the universe or something. When things get really shitty, these avatar storms happen and imbue a bunch of people
Well, and that's
in
one
order to
interesting
fight
thing
away
is
the darkness.
And the interesting thing is that there is a book out there that has a bunch of hunter stuff in it. It's called the Inquisitor, I believe, books. They're the Dark Ages books that give you, if you look at their powers, they're almost exactly similar to what hunters have. And so there's this concept that a lot of people say, in the hunter book kind of says that were no hunters before 1999. However, if you go back and look at the Inquisition, they had hunters and they had the same kind of powers. Um,
To a certain degree, it wasn't the same powers, and they explained them in different ways. It was kind of like hedge magic, or I think there was one that was like true belief magic, like religious. And I kind of feel like as we move into the 2000s era of World of Darkness, they kind of dropped those off. Like I could be wrong about that.
no, there's true
But
faith is a
anyway,
huge
so
thing in the
so
20th century, as well as hedge magic is a huge thing in the 20th century. But the books I'm talking about are very different. They're not hedge magic or true faith. It's specifically it's the
yeah,
Inquisitor
it's
books.
the Inquisition. And yeah, there's a word for it, but I can't remember what it is. Um, but regardless of all that, in the Madison Under Siege mythos, hunters did exist before 1999. There just weren't many. And so this one guy who had built this thing called the Hunter Academy and based it in Madison, uh, all of a sudden there's a lot of hunters. And he was aware of the Gahara Pact before the Avatar Storm. But then when he found out about this stuff, he went to the Gahara Pact and he was basically like, I have some people that can solve your Shadowlands problem. And they did. And we never really came up with anything solid on that. It was just the hunters are now a part of the Gahara Pact because they're the ones that have figured out how to obscure the node in the Shadowlands.
Yeah, and add that extra little oomph that is needed. And we hadn't really figured out exactly what the hunters did with their portion of the node magic either. We kind of maybe that the danger room obelisk thing that you use might be related to that
Yeah,
to a small degree, but
yeah, I think even if they're not able to use the energy, because the way hunters use energy is like if you can superpower them, uh, that basically just means you can level up really fast, and then that's kind of silly. Um, but yeah, there's other ways you could maybe say that they've figured out a way to channel the energy into making their effects larger, so that the person that there's a set of people who have to ward the area of the Hunter Academy. Wards are slightly stronger because they have access to the node. Um, but I think more than anything else, access to information was the thing that Redmond Thatcher uh, was really going for. Being a part of the organization was more important to him than anything else.
right, yep. Yeah, and that makes 100% sense.
Yeah.
So and then after that we kind of went into our own kind of world, and we didn't or our own where we started actually playing the games at Gen Con and having players get involved, um, and from then on we didn't really do anything special with the Supernode besides just having it power all of these things. We had some events that happened with how the vampires were making their blood, which is like they basically eventually they created like this giant creature underneath Madison that just was filled with all this, uh, you know, pure blood basically that they could, that they were just injecting a bunch of quiescence into this thing in order to make it grow bigger and have all this human-like blood in it that the vampires could feed off of, and that turned into a problem. But we didn't really have any of the other groups really dig in deeper, use much of that node in game. We just kind of used it as a way to explain why Madison is the way that it is.
Yeah, there's more energy, and there's a very specific reason why all of the factions work together and know each other. It's basically the MacGuffin that we needed to make a tabletop LARP work at Gen Con when there's a table of werewolves and a table of vampires. Because otherwise,
and well, one of the big things that we did in the
fight each other.
Well, and one of the big things we did at the beginning of that is that none of the other groups knew about this Gahara Pact, and none of the people that were, no other werewolves. No, there was only one or two people basically from each group that knew, and then all of the leaders died. So JD dies, Rebecca Troy dies. I can't remember what the werewolf's name was, or the hunter.
Walter Christopherson.
Yep, and then what was the
and Redmond Thatcher.
Redmond Thatcher. So all four of those people die, but they all had like one person underneath them that was kind of teaching them, they're basically they all had an apprentice, and that apprentice went on to become part of the Gahara Pact. But now that all of them got assassinated at the same time, this is definitely something big going on. If you can kill some of the most powerful creatures on Earth when they're meeting together inside of a supernode where they should be probably the most secure and safe. And so that kind of sparked all the rest of the groups to have to figure out these murders. They all had to learn that, there was this Gahara Pact, this supernode, and this fight that's happening with the Nameless, basically, is what we did.
Yeah. And I believe that first year was the Hunter Academy was attacked by evil hunters. The mages were attacked by the technocracy, was it?
Yeah, I think it was the technocracy. The first year.
The werewolves got attacked by their big bad, which was William Erdogan Burke, who was the double shape changer. He was the
Oh yeah.
He was actually a werewolf, but so there's a thing called skin riders or skin dancers.
Yep.
Which Samuel Haight, one of the famous NPCs, was a skin dancer where he had to like patch together 5 werewolf skins and do this like really messed up ritual to become a kind of he's a werewolf.
He's a werewolf.
Automatically Black Spiral.
Yeah, he's a ghoul werewolf mage.
Yeah.
So he gets to keep his spheres. He got to do all the werewolf stuff, and he gets to have vampire disciplines because he's a ghoul.
Yeah, it was.
And then he gets turned into an ashtray. That's the best. That's the best part. Is the end is he's an ashtray in the Dark Umbra. Like he gets killed, becomes a wraith, and then when he becomes a wraith, he gets turned into an ashtray immediately.
Yeah, but anyway, so that was just to introduce the idea of skin dancer, which is in the books. I think you have to be a kinfolk of werewolves first, and then you do this worm-tainted ritual to graft a set of werewolf skins onto yourself. And then you basically become a werewolf. So my big bad was this guy who he had been receiving instructions from the Nameless, and he was legitimately a werewolf who became a Black Spiral. And then the Nameless taught him this ritual, and he went out and he found some mokale, which is the were lizards, the dinosaur shape changers, and he is a skin dancer for were lizards,
which is
and so
ridiculous.
he's
That's just epic, powerful.
uh, yeah, I don't think he never got used properly for a fight because we didn't go past year 3. He was supposed to be like the big bad for the werewolves. Um, but the idea was there was the track of shape changers.
Hmm.
So Krynos is in the middle, wolf and then human, and so Mokale has the same thing. It's dinosaur at this end, human at this end, and then your war form up here.
They
But
only have
so there's
three
two
though,
arcs.
just human war
Oh, they
form, and
oh, they only have 3.
they only have three, or yeah, three. They don't have the in betweens of, if I remember correctly, for the Mokale. I could be wrong about that though.
That's probably right. I don't remember. But the idea is there's 2 arcs and there's 2 war forms. But then I was going to say that there's a war form in the middle that's like werewolf plus dinosaur war form. And
Yeah.
that was going to be like his final shape that he turned into, that you fight at the end of the whole thing.
Yeah, and of course, when you go into that form, you heal all of your damage.
Oh
The
yeah,
first time you
probably.
do that, just because that's the
Yeah,
boss fight mechanic.
yeah.
I
Although,
beat him. Nope, he's got all of his life back.
yeah, the mechanic that somebody suggested to me, I think it was one of my other GMs, Charles, said in order for him to maintain that form, he has to spend a rage every round.
Ooh, yeah.
So that like he can probably do a buttload of damage per round and do a lot of powers and stuff. But it's like at that point, how many rounds does he have?
Right.
Probably less than 10 because he's already used rage.
Right. Well, you can gain some rage during combat, but
Yeah, I suppose.
it's not as easy to keep your war form going if you have to spend a rage every turn. That's for sure. Uh,
Yeah.
But yeah, so and that kind of gives you kind of just a general overview of what we did with these concepts of a supernode in Madison. And I it was one thing that I think was awesome was going back through history and trying to find things throughout history to match up with what we wanted to do with this supernode. And I think that kind of was an experience that um, was just epic to kind of go back through all of history. Like we have this, I don't know how many pages, but like it's like 20-page document plus of just different events that happened throughout the world of darkness and the real world, and then we went, okay, now we're going to add in what happened in Madison during these times. And it was just it really created like this really strong feeling of I have a really good feeling for what the history of Madison is in the real world and in my fictional world that I created.
Yeah. Yeah, it's actually one of my most favorite parts of World of Darkness is that because it's set in our world, uh, you get to find out things about our world when you either play in or research to run a game, and actually along the lines of going back in time to figure out like how to fit things in. Reading about something that happened 100 years ago, like that fire that happened at the Capitol. We took that and said, "Oh, let's use that and do this," and that's how we came up with the idea that his first experiment failed.
Yeah.
Uh, and so, and you can do that for basically any city in the world. Like, come up with your backstory, because in World of Darkness, vampires and mages and werewolves to a certain extent are very long lived. So
Well,
you can
werewolves
go
not
back and say,
necessarily long lived, but they're very
uh,
family oriented or whatever. Like the line
yeah, they
goes.
they're history oriented. So like Galliards
Mhm.
pass on things,
Yeah, that's what it is.
but
The
yes,
Galliards.
they do not live long.
No,
At
no,
least they shouldn't.
they normally don't. They usually don't make it to 60. It's something like I think if you get to a certain age, there's like even honor involved with that, isn't there? Or something. or even dishonor, I think, if you like live for too
I
long.
don't know.
But anyways, but yeah, I think that that's a good little wrap up here on what we are calling Madison's Supernode. Is there anything that you want to include before we wrap up here?
Mm, no, I think I'm good.
All right, cool. Well, thank you all for watching Crossing Darkness, and we will see you again at Sunday at 7 p.m. Have a good one.
Later, guys.